All right, Dan, welcome. So good to have you here. One of my favorite people in partnerships, one of my favorite people in general. Um, maybe we can just get started by talking a little bit about your journey to how you got here today. I was very fortunate to be able to lure you away from Google, but I know that you had a long career history already before that. So tell us a little bit more about how you end up doing what you're doing.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I had a very interesting background. I actually left university and started working for Deloitte as a consultant. And then after that, I actually went to the largest bank in Australia and was on like a graduate leadership program where I somehow managed to convince someone to put me in charge of customer experience for equities and margin lending products, which I knew nothing about and I still don't know a lot about. Um, and that was a really good time. And throughout the course of that sort of leadership program, I realized it was time for me to take some time off and travel around the world. So I actually took a year off, a career break. Yeah, career break after working for 3 years. And then in that time kind of realized I wanted to make a pivot. And so when I came back to Australia, I actually was approached by some people that worked at Google to apply for this partnership role that I didn't really know anything of. And I was kind of like, wait, why? I don't know anything about technology. So there's a theme going here. Like I don't know anything about most things that I'm working on. But yeah, they sort of reached out and they were starting this new sort of they had this product that they were trying to figure out what to do with. So at Google, I was brought across to help sort of build the AdMob business. So AdMob was a product that Google had bought to help them work with app developers and help those app developers monetize. So if you think about Google as a marketplace, they had all of these advertisers, but they didn't have a lot of mobile inventory, and so AdMob was a way to go out and to sort of partner with developers. So I did that for 2.5 years, and then I was fortunate enough to be brought over to the US to help build the demand side of that business and help go after mobile advertisers. And so while I was at Google, one of my sort of core areas that I built up was helping build out sort of our gaming portfolio of advertisers and that entire ecosystem. So that was a really fun 2.5 years, 3 years of insane growth, like absolute insanity when it comes to growth, but really working with everyone in the industry from advertisers to the developers, getting to work closely with the Google Play team and talking about app distribution, really going uh, out on Google's behalf to these advertisers and these gaming studios to advise them on growth and how they could really acquire users and grow their apps organically and through paid channels. And then that kind of then brought me to Tai, where all roads lead to Tai. So actually, I was very content at Google. I really loved my job, and I was fortunate enough that you reached out to me with a role. And again, I was like, I don't actually know if what you're calling partnerships are the type of partnerships that I am used to leading. So we had a great conversation. I was so stoked that, with the product, I spoke to a bunch of my customers that I knew used Google, my Google customers that I knew used Amplitude, and they were all like, "This product is the bee's knees. You need to align with it." And so, at the time, I thought I was taking a leap, like this big leap into the unknown, but it turns out it's one of the best career moves I've ever made. So I've been at Amplitude now since October 2018 when I came across, as you know, I was building out the solution partner business for North America, and then over time have now sort of absorbed the technology partner program, and I'm also building out our channel sales team as well. So it's been a fun 3 years, lots of change, lots of improvement, lots of new partnerships. But all in all, I can say it's been a phenomenal experience, and yeah, I've had a range of different partnership type experiences. It all hasn't been with solution partners, or it all hasn't been with developers and ISVs. Agency experience, sort of B2B to B experience. So it's been a really interesting career to date.
Yeah, love it. And you were definitely one of the trickiest customers that I ever had trying to recruit over. You negotiated very well, and I felt very fortunate to be able to get you and have you on the team. And it really up leveled everything that we were doing there. So yeah, I feel very lucky that you kind of came along and joined us. And like at the time, at Amplitude, it definitely wasn't a sure thing. We were very early on partnerships and very early as a company. It looked a lot different then to what it looks like now. So you definitely took a leap on us, which was great. Uh, so our careers kind of started in a somewhat similar way, I think, where I started at Amex and did a similar kind of rotation on a bunch of different projects there, and like it then went into Optimizely and kind of didn't really have that much experience in tech. But what I found was, like, going to Optimizely, that there was a bunch of like things at Amex that we already did pretty well with regards to partnerships that I didn't even know were called partnerships at the time. But then once I got into Optimizely, I was like, oh, why don't we work with anyone for this? Like, why are we doing this by ourselves?
Yeah.
Was there anything that you saw at the bank that then you kind of have brought into other aspects of your career, where even though it's like an old school company, they're still doing some things that are like quite forward thinking?
Yeah, it's really interesting. One of the it's not necessarily to do with partnerships, but it's this the culture of kind of like test and fail really, really quickly. So you know, it's people always sort of look at me with blank face when I say this, but the Australian banks are probably some of the most tech savvy organizations out there. I mean, Australia had the equivalent of Venmo and PayPal and peer to peer payments in 2010. And it was an initiative led by all of the banks, right? So, like, it wasn't a tech company coming to disrupt the banks. It was the banks collaborating together to make real time peer to peer payments possible. And so one of the things that, I learned early on at the bank was, how to prioritize, how to really be able to rule something in and out very quickly, and then how to essentially scale something. And that's really um, I think sort of the hallmark of me is that I'm willing to try a lot of things, but I can rule something in and out very quickly. And it's really funny to say that I learned how to be agile and sort of test fast, fail fast at like one of the largest banks in the world that has, like, 50,000 employees and is known for pushing paper from person A to person B. But yeah, that was an interesting one. And then as I think sort of more broadly, part of my team and my the business that I looked after was wholesale equities and margin lending. And so early on, the company that I worked for was the largest trading platform, and we would white label our solution, and other banks would actually be using our back end, and we would staff a call center, we would staff the trading desks, and people would answer the phone and be like, hello, even though they were sitting across the street from and employed by the bank that we worked for. So I got really good exposure early on to like that wholesale model, that white label model, and it's really been something that we don't do any of that at Amplitude, but at least it's something that I can approach that problem with at least knowledge of, like, okay, here's how one or two companies that I know do it. And so that's been interesting, because as we start to look at, where is the future revenue growth, where are the future potential growth levers for Amplitude, or even, other companies, I'm not afraid to go out and test that model because I've seen it work.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. There's definitely a lot of things that these companies got right, and I think we were in a similar spot in the UK where we had a lot of that tech very early, and like there are fintech disruptors still in the UK. I'm sure in Australia as well, but definitely not to the extent that you see it out here. So like, tell us a little bit about the kind of Google ecosystem that you interacted with, and like just the culture of partnerships that you saw there. I mean, obviously Google has a gigantic ecosystem because it has a gigantic product suite and offering, you know, but all the way from app developers to like ad agencies to like companies doing support and implementation for Google Analytics, like you know, and everything in between. But tell us a little bit about your experience in the Google ecosystem and like how that kind of primed you for what you do at Amplitude.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, right? Because like as you mentioned, Google is a multi-product, what part of Google were you working in depends on what ecosystem you're in. But I felt really fortunate to be at Google during the rise of mobile. Like mobile was around, but Google was getting their butt whooped by Facebook in the advertising space. For a really long time until we launched, the Universal Apps product that I was part of. Um, the ecosystem of partners that we worked with, my team specifically worked very closely with agencies. So, agencies that were buying on behalf of their clients, buying Google Media on behalf of their clients. And so within that, there was a team of people just focused on going out and educating the agencies on our product, on how to use it, on what were the signals that a campaign was doing good versus what was the signals maybe you needed to pull back from. But the other cool part about what we were building is we were such a new team inside of Google that we also then got to go and work with the Google Play team, and go and work with the developer advocate team that was out there working on building programs for developers so that they could build best in class mobile applications on Android. Because at the time, and I don't know if it's still the case now because I haven't stayed super close to it, but like at the time, developers would develop their apps on iOS significantly earlier than they would develop their Android apps because they would monetize a lot better. And so, we were looking at those problems as an ecosystem of, my team was the ads team, but then there was the ad mob team, which was the team that I came from, which was talking about publisher monetization. There was the team, the developer advocate team that was out there kind of getting people to adopt Android best practices. Then there was, a range of product teams that were trying to build mobile advertising solutions and mobile solutions for these companies to be able to really expand their business. And so, I alluded to this. It's like when I think about partnerships at Google, it depended what role you were in, right? When I first started, I was a partner manager in the sense of I had a portfolio of accounts that I was responsible for helping them grow the revenue that they were earning from Google, right? From serving ads or cross sell sort of advertisements inside of their games. And then so that was like a real partnership. I'd go out, I'd work with them, I'd talk to them, I'd understand like their reservations and their hesitation of putting more ads into their game or into their product. Or, if they were a retailer, we would talk about what's serving an ad to someone that's not going to purchase isn't a bad strategy to monetize them because they're not going to monetize otherwise. And so it really was a partnership. And then you swing over to when I moved to the US, I had to learn a whole new language, which was user acquisition, performance marketers, Now, you could argue that partnership in this sense was really someone paying Google to buy ads, but we really took that to the next level, right? We rolled out creative services. That was another thing that I helped roll out while I was there, which is like, hey, we want to help you design really good creative so that your app stands out. It stands out in the crowd of thousands of apps that are entering the App Store every year. And so I think like the interesting thing here is that this role really showed me the ability or the power of being able to bring together multiple teams. We worked with product. We had to continuously come back to product and say, hey, our advertisers aren't seeing what you're saying they're supposed to be seeing. Is something broken? So we had to learn about, had to learn 101 of machine learning and to understand so that we could go out and talk to our clients about, this new product that we were launching that was kind of like, um, uh, trust us, just tell us how much you want to spend, give us some ads, and we'll let the machine go and buy. And so we had to build a lot of trust with our partners and our advertising partners, really, because they were spending millions of dollars with us a year, and you can't just be like, just trust us. So we rolled out creative services. We came to them with strategies to think about their app store listing. We came to them with strategies about YouTube and building brand, which was really new to them. And so it really kind of taught me, my whole time at Google really taught me two things. One, how to bring together a cross functional team to take out a holistic solution. And then two, how to work cross functionally with the internal teams so that the end partner experience was this like seamless, oh my god, Google is rolling out all of this stuff for me. Like, look at all of this stuff Google is giving me in terms of education and training so that I can be a better business. And our thing was, yes, you could spend $100 million a year with Google. You were going to get a dedicated account manager and a dedicated team. My team was focused on the companies that weren't spending that money. And so we were trying to roll out a similar level of thought leadership and partnership to these companies, because whether you spend $5 or whether you spend $1 million, you're still making an investment. And it was always great to be able to pull together teams and be able to invest back in those organizations, even if it wasn't monetarily investing in them. It's interesting because when I came to Amplitude, it was a whole different model, right? Like we're dealing with solution partners and tech partners. But if you bring together those principles of like always trying to find the win-win for someone, and giving and getting, or giving and receiving, in equal parts, I think that kind of principle just is what I operate with on every day here. And I think that's what sort of set me up for success in this role.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think like when I think about partner manager roles or like partnerships roles in general, it's like every partnerships person has to kind of be a little bit of a enabler, a little bit of an account manager, a little bit of a salesperson, a little bit of a marketer, and like dependent on what partner team you're on, like one of those is like up. And in that role at Google, it's like the account management like is turned up, and it's like, hey, we're trying to like generate more, like max out revenue on these accounts, and like on another partner team it might be maxed out on enablement, and we're just trying to get people to build apps, and like and so I understand. I mean, like definitely there's so much transferable skills there, and like so tell like I think the holy grail for most partner or ecosystem programs is kind of what the app store marketplace it kind of ends up at. It's like AWS has their marketplace, Salesforce has their marketplace, like Apple has their app store, Google has the app store, and like that being able to like enable an ecosystem so much that you can take like a rev share and like a decent component of it is like really like the end goal, I think, for every partner team. But like I think there's a lot of question marks around who really owns that, and like in Google's case, like that Android ecosystem was like a strategic bet within itself. Could you just like talk a little bit more about how you interacted with that developer advocate team, like how that rolled into the other parts of the business and like how that whole thing worked? I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah, I think like the biggest I mean, it's interesting I haven't thought about this for a really long time, but I remember starting, and developer advocates were almost like they were almost like your ace in your pocket. Like if you could bring a developer advocate to a meeting with a company, a Google developer advocate to a meeting with a company, it was like, oh my god, like what are you like? We'll do whatever it is that you tell us, right? Like, or you ask of us. Um, and it was kind of, that was a really weird relationship, right? Because all the power was on the developer advocate side, right? Because they were the ones that were like, you know, they were the ones that were selecting which apps got featured. They were the ones that were selecting, which apps got on stage at Google I/O and which companies would get promoted. And so the first couple of years, it was very much like, you were calling a favor pretty much every day. Like, hey, can I? And it was funny because when I moved to the US, there was this guy that took over the consulting or started sort of the BD side of the Play Store. Um, and he was really the driving force around bringing a lot of these teams together because he was like, hey, like, yes, we can do this and we can do that, but we should be sharing opportunity, and we should be listening to the cross-functional teams. So whilst Play and the developer advocates sat in the engineering org, they didn't sit in the product org. They were the ones bringing the advertising team, the other engineering teams, the other product teams all together, and so it was interesting because as I think about this now, the dynamic shifted from one of like us being always feeling like we were asking and not giving, to it being very much like, oh, we have this developer, could someone come in and do a 2-day consult for them on how they should be structuring their ads campaigns. you know it was a win-win for everyone because everyone was always looking for opportunity, whereas before it was like the business side of the house was just looking for opportunity and the developers advocate team were just coming in and out, as opposed to sort of working together. I
Yeah,
don't know if that
yeah.
answers the
It
question.
does. Yeah, yeah, it does. And it's awesome. I think that like that's where people would really love to get to. I think that's kind of how it often starts out, right? It's like if you think about like another tech company is like product team are building integrations because the customers need them, and then the tech partnerships team are like, oh, there's an opportunity for us to do more from a go to market perspective, and those two strategies kind of like diverge quite a lot, and then ultimately one day someone gets it all together and they're like, hey, like there's a there's a huge amount of business here, and you end up with like people carrying massive quotas to drive business through the ecosystem, and like have those kind of developers benefit, and that like create this amazing flywheel. So it's awesome to hear more about that. Like when in your experience working with those kind of UA and performance marketers, like what was the split of companies doing it themselves versus like agencies that were managing spend for companies that like that you were working with at least?
Yeah, I would say in the early days it was probably like 60-40, probably 60% self-serve, 40% agency. But like Google and Facebook started rolling out these sort of machine learning products that took a lot of the labor out of campaign management. So, that was 60-40. And that was in the days when you would have to type in every single keyword that you wanted to target, right? So you would have thousands of campaigns to try and get installs. And as we sort of moved the product set to be sort of more self serve, it became harder for agencies to just say, well, you use us because we'll run your campaigns. They had to start finding these value added services, which is actually funny enough. I remember talking about this with the CRO at the time when I was interviewing for Amplitude to say, like, why aren't we talking to advertising agencies? They could be using this data to drive like a ton of value for their clients. And at the time, I don't think anyone had really thought of that because our motion was product. But yeah, it's interesting to think back now, like, and retrospectively think about all of those different things. But yeah, I mean, that was part of our job. Part of our job was to go and help these agencies figure out what those value added services are that they needed to offer, because running campaign, we took away their ability to say, well, our value is we'll run the campaigns for you. We're like, well, the machine's going to run the campaigns for you. What are you doing? Like, are you doing creative optimization? Are you doing A/B testing? Are you doing, are you helping them build better video assets? Are you helping them optimize their brand strategy? Are you helping them do their modeling, their ROAS and their CLTV modeling? And so it was an interesting time because the paradigm shifted right underneath all these agencies' feet because the technology changed. And that was what the partnership was. The partnership was helping some of these agencies really reinvent themselves and reinvent their business model, and some of the ways that they were, they attributed value to their clients.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it's awesome that like there was a concerted effort to do that, where it's like, hey, this is on our product roadmap, but we're also going to kind of help the agencies get ahead of the product roadmap so they still have businesses and kind of can still nurture that ecosystem. That's awesome. Like, have you got an example of like a success story there where like someone was able to kind of move some of their core work? And then I'd love to hear also your perspective on like, do you think that agencies are going to be able to do that forever, or do you think that there's a point where, you know, especially with a lot of the AI products that are coming out today, where there just won't be that much room for agencies to do much on top of these ad products, and they are just going to kind of run and optimize themselves?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. It's an interesting question, the second part. So the first part, I think there's a really good story that I always tell people, like, you know, historically an advertiser would go to an agency and be like, what do we do? Like, what pitch us some ideas on some campaigns. But it was really interesting because we'd rolled out Firebase a couple of years before this, because this was maybe just before I left, and I was down in Los Angeles working with a client that the client was they were building like a car marketplace, essentially like a buying and selling marketplace, and that was what their app was. And we were working with the agency as well, so it was like a tri-party meeting. It was Google, the agency, this client. And you know, in those meetings historically, the agency would be the ideas person, right? Here's all our ideas. You know, the reason I bring up Firebase is not because the client was using Firebase, but it was a really good way for the agency to say, hey, what if we put Firebase in and we could get some baseline analytics? We could start looking at, beyond the surface of which campaigns are driving which users, but which users are completing the actions that we want them to complete, so that we can go out and find more users that look like them, or vice versa, or even more, sorry, I should say, we can go and interview those users to figure out what it is that they're doing, or what value it is that they're getting that other users aren't, right? And it dovetailed. The reason it's a great story is when I think about that meeting, it was, us working with them to enable them on, Firebase's capabilities, which, Firebase is not the world's greatest analytics solution, but it was better than what the client had. And so the dynamic shift in the dynamic in the meeting, sorry, wasn't just like, here we're looking to the agency for all our solutions, but the client could actually see Google and the agency sort of exchanging ideas for the betterment of them. And so that relationship with the agency, they ended up starting to roll this out across a bunch of their clients, where they would go in, they'd pitch a small analytics statement of work, they'd get some analytics in, whether that was Firebase or a laugh, because there was a lot of Amplitude in there, or a lot of Mixpanel at the time, or any of the other analytics solutions. They'd get those in there and they'd start looking at the data to be like, hey, we could be doing better advertising here, or we could be going and hitting on these channels that we didn't even know existed. So that's like sort of a story that always comes to mind, that I don't know that funnily enough, I don't know that the app ever really survived, or whether they got crushed by Carvana or something like that. But I just remember being in that meeting and being like, this is how it should be, right? This is how
Yeah.
the should be, where everyone's exchanging ideas and you're not just looking to the agency to solve all of your problems. Because if we'd have done that in that meeting, the agency would have been shit out of luck, because there was no value for them. Because to the answer of the second question, we'd taken all of that away from them with technology, right? Technology had moved so that it was, self-serve, Google and Facebook running all of your campaigns for you with like the click of a button. You put this and this in, and we'll pump out, the results for you. I think that it's probably a great thing for the agency industry, because it keeps the business model needs to continuously change. And I'm seeing this now at Amplitude, right? The type of partners that we were working with when you and I were working on partnerships in 2018 are vastly different than the type of partners we're working with now. And that's because more and more agencies are starting to realize again, here's another shift in the market, but a lot of these agencies that are so used to third-party cookies for third-party targeting have now got to have a first-party data solution, of which Amplitude is one of the better solutions out on the market. So they've got to figure out like, well, how do we bring Amplitude in? How do we build statements of work? How do we build practices and businesses around Amplitude and first-party data? And so, I think that change in technology is always a great thing. I think that ML and AI is only going to continuously ratchet up and do more automation. You're seeing more automation companies pop up anyway. So it's those agencies that can continuously look for the opportunity to adapt that are going to win. And I think that that's actually the best thing for the market, and that's the best thing for the customers, is you don't have stagnant agencies. You're going to an agency because you want their advice or you want their help on something. You don't want an agency that's stuck in the past, still delivering services from 2001 when AdWord, or whenever AdWords started, and they're still optimizing keyword campaigns when you could be doing all of that way more efficiently and effectively. And the agencies then bringing you the agencies you're working with are bringing you different value and helping you augment your business in ways that you probably didn't think of before.
Yeah, absolutely love that. Fascinating stuff, and I think you know the it's really cool to hear that that's the trend. Like with the Apple changes, like tracking changes, with the cookie tracking changes, like people having to up level their game and really get focused on like behavioral data as a way to improve, because that's something that we'd talked about a lot, and like maybe a couple of the kind of creative ad agencies had like shown a little bit of interest, but like it was something that was kind of mostly fell on deaf ears. So that's like really, really cool to hear. Like, tell us a little bit more about the rest of the Amplitude partnerships ecosystem at the moment and what it looks like and how it's evolved.
Yeah, it's been one of amazing change. So, if you think about Amplitude's partner ecosystem, we have three types of partners. We have our solution partners, which services, agency partners, everyone from your top management consulting firms and GSIs right down to the one or two person consulting agencies. We've also built out a really robust technology partner program. So that includes everything from our major alliance with AWS and our cloud partners like Snowflake, right down to all of our ISV partners, whether that's our really strong partnerships with like Braze and Iterable, or the emerging technology, the new wave of technology that's coming out to disrupt sort of the older wave of tech. And then the third, which I don't do too much with, is our reseller business. And so Amplitude thinks about resellers in markets that we don't necessarily have a direct presence in. And so, it's been a really interesting couple of years. So in 2019, when you left Amplitude to go on to your next role, sort of we looked at the business and we started to say, well, how does this evolve, right? How do we make this more impactful to the business? How do we become a larger portion um, of the business's net ARR? And so we pivoted our model to be very much focused on referred business, right? We had historically looked at the entire gambit of referred and influenced. We very much went hard on referred pipeline from our partners. And that changed a lot of things. It changed a lot of the motions that we had. It changed the way that we enabled the field. It changed even how we went out and enabled partners. And so in 2020, uh, my boss Lisa started, and we basically started to undertake a process of really looking at Amplitude. At that point really had the look and feel of an enterprise company, right? It was very clear that there was product market fit and that there was an IPO potentially imminent. We didn't know at the time. All we knew was that we had to build a partner program that was enterprise ready. So when you look at like a Salesforce, or you look at a ServiceNow, or you look at a Zendesk, we had to show up in the way that they were showing up. That meant bolstering our partner enablement. That meant building out better tiering systems and gives and gets for our solution and technology partners. It meant that we didn't partner with everyone. We partnered with the partners that made sense for us, right? But that we had ways for anyone that wanted to partner or integrate with Amplitude to be able to do that. And so, we did that. And then in 2021, we launched the Amplitude partner ecosystem, which was, met really, with a lot of success from our partners. The market loved it. At the time, we were getting a lot of press about it. It really helped us elevate our game. And what it actually did was create a sort of a magnet approach to our, or a magnet effect to our ecosystem. Whereas before, a lot of it had been us outbounding services partners and technology partners that we might want to work with. We started to see a lot more inbound interest, and not just from, smaller companies. We saw SIs, GSIs starting to really take a look and lean in and say, hey, we want enablement. We want to understand what our business could look like if we used, if we had a partnership with Amplitude. And I won't say the partner's name for to keep it anonymous, but a partner that you and I had worked with for a really long time that was an SI, I can proudly say is Amplitude's hands down number one partner in terms of business that we do together, because we were really successful at nailing the how does this help you make more money from a services perspective, but ultimately, how does this help you drive better outcomes for your customers that are coming to you asking you for technology advice? And that was like a 2 or 3 year journey before we got there. But that first deal came in, and then it was almost like a tidal wave of deals coming in and opportunities. And so, it's been a phenomenal 3.5 years at Amplitude, but it's really feels still just like the beginning, right? We've just launched this program last year, and this year we're starting to see some of the returns of those investments that we've made.
Yeah, I love it. And I think I have a sneaking suspicion who that company might be. And it might be the one you basically like from day one that you joined Amplitude were working on. Like was there like a unlock for them? Like because you put in a lot of time and effort and legwork and invested up front, and like worked with different people, and went up and down in the organization, different locations, like everything that a person could possibly do. Like you did it, and did it like at an expert level. Like, but was there something that it was a trigger point, or was it just an accumulation of that hard work that you'd been doing that like kind of was the unlock for that relationship?
I think it was a combination of both, right? What you're referencing is, I feel like one of my skills is really connecting with people and connecting people to a vision. Am I like the most technical person in the world? No one is ever giving me a gold star for being technical. So, I would go in and sell the vision of what Amplitude was trying to achieve and what we could do, tell the sort of be the storyteller. And so over the course of, 2 years or 18 months, really build a sort of identified who the champions were. And there was, if I think about what was the turning point, we had a consultant in a market in the Pacific Northwest who was actually a director of his practice, who we pitched. And that might have been, I don't know, in February 2019. And in, maybe it was like November 2019. So 10 months later, we get this inbound um, that was like, hey, I think I've got an opportunity for y'all. Also, I've written this article that I've just published on a blog post. And we went in and we looked at the article, and the company Amplitude's name was mentioned 34 times in this article. Like, and it was like, so it was the groundwork of building sort of awareness. And then we kind of, once we had that win, it was like celebrating that win internally. And we actually then found another managing director who looks after the MarTech practice, who at the time, didn't really understand what Amplitude was, but as soon as could connect the dots, was like, oh my goodness, this is a whole new game for us, right? This is a whole new capability that we could be building around. And I think that was it. It was like building the base of champions so that when you found the person that was like the right person, you had 20 people ready to jump on them and be like, yes, we need to do this. And I think that was kind of the tipping point that sort of got us started. And then, I've built a team of people here now that are dedicated to supporting those partnerships. So we have someone that's dedicated to this particular partner. Whereas before it was like one of the 18 partners that I was trying to manage at the time. So it's good proof of like investing ahead of time, being able to test fast, fail fast on different initiatives, figure out what works. But then as soon as you see what works, you've got the ability to throw resources to add fuel to the flame.
Yeah, absolutely love that. And it's so good to hear that all of that work paid off. I think we talked a lot about how just planting the seeds, and you have to go and plant so many seeds and water them, and then like one day one of them's going to sprout. And it sounded like that kind of happened there, and it was a lot of hard work that you put in. So it's awesome to hear that. Like as we wrap up, something we like to ask is there something that you recently learned that you'd be excited to share with others?
Yeah, so the other part of my role has really been around our tech partner program. And so I've spent the last sort of 6 to 12 months really re-envisaging what that looks like. And I think the biggest learning that I have, which it's not I don't think anyone's going to be shocked when they hear this, but not everyone that integrates with you is a partner. Like, so we have a product that can integrate with any technology really, but I've got to like educate my field and my company to say, hey, we have these integrations versus we have these partners. Because a partnership, as we talked about, is the exchange of value, right? If only one side is receiving value from an integration, they're not necessarily a partner. They're an integration point, and you're building that integration to make your customers' lives easier. Your partners are the ones that you're saying, hey, if we invest marketing, co-sale, and enablement resources at this partnership, we can advance our business together versus, if I invest, marketing resources with a small partner, they're probably going to get a lot more value out of it than us because, they probably don't have the same database to tap into to drive people to an event. So I think it's an interesting learning that's taken me a lot of time, but yeah, it's like not everyone that you work with is a partner, and that's okay. And it's okay for them to be part of your ecosystem, but not necessarily the partners at the same level of the partnerships that we're trying to build.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think that's a really good one for everyone to learn. And like, not just like the partnerships team, but also being really clear from a go to market perspective as well. I know that we've had some backlash in the past where, we've had an integration and something's gone wrong with a deal on one of those companies. It's like, hey, like, we don't even talk to that company,
Yeah,
this.
exactly. I don't even know them.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Don't blame it on me.
well, that's that one.
Yeah, man, I love it. Well, Dan, I always love catching up with you, and it's amazing to hear everything's going so well, and just like getting your insights and experience on all of this stuff is like so incredibly valuable. So I'm sure everyone who's hearing this is going to feel the same way, and I can't wait to see the talk that you're doing Catalyst in August as well in Miami. It's going to be amazing. And so if I don't see you before, I'll see you there, but hopefully I'll see you soon before then.
Appreciate it, Ty. Thanks for the time, and see you in Miami.
Yeah, can't wait. Thanks, man.